stared blankly out across the darkening gorge. He was naturally thin and wiry, having just reached 20 years of age, and even under his thick winter tunic he could feel the cold seeping up from the ground. His arms were folded tight across his chest, trying to stave off the chill, and his legs felt numb. At first he was unsure what the flicker of light was. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him after the long hours of cold and fear. But it continued, bigger now, a ball of orange which seemed to grow by the minute, shooting high into the night sky. The idea was so inconceivable that it was a while before Riga fully understood what he was seeing. Long tongues of fire, fanned and bolstered by the wind, were spreading out across the great timbers of the monastery roof. Even against the dark night sky he could make out the smoke twisting upwards, the ashes billowing in the heat. Dragging himself upright, Riga staggered forward, mesmerized by the flames. He had to see what was happening. He had to see it with his own eyes. Snow scattered from overhanging leaves as he pushed his way through the undergrowth. His breath was coming shorter now from the climb, until at last he stumbled into a clearing and saw the main facade of the monastery. Raising his arm to shield his face from the sudden wall of heat, he squinted at the devastation. The doors of the great library hung askew from massive hinges, their timbers charred and crumbling. Beyond, at the edge of the vaulted room, a towering mass of books was rapidly being engulfed by a wall of blue flame. Riga moved further on, away from the heat, his felt boots passing soundlessly over the stone paving. So far he hadn't seen a single person, either soldier or monk. Then he began to hear it, a thin, keening sound rising above the crackle of the fire. Squatting behind one of the huge wooden columns that surrounded the main courtyard, Riga then saw dim silhouettes moving between the shadows. Most of the monks stood round the edges of the courtyard, while in the centre, about 30 of the eldest or most infirm stood together, herded into a tight cluster like cattle. Chinese soldiers stood in front of them, their black uniforms melting into the night. About 10 yards from the main entrance to the courtyard, a young novice monk had been blindfolded. He stood facing a blank section of wall, shoulders hunched. Riga looked more closely and saw a rifle hanging loosely from his hands, the muzzle hovering only an inch or so above the ground. Suddenly, the soldiers around him started shouting, thrusting their rifles into the air like clenched fists. "Shoot! Shoot!" As the novice took a pace backwards, struggling to raise the barrel of the rifle towards the blank wall with trembling hands, two of the soldiers grabbed one of the older monks from the huddle in the centre and pushed him directly in front of the weapon. Invisible to the novice, the old monk stumbled in front of him, his face only a few feet from the gun barrel. A high-pitched wail rose and echoed around the courtyard as the other monks bore witness to the scene. "Shoot! Shoot!" shouted the soldiers once again. The novice paused, bewildered by the noise. One of the soldiers closed in on him. He moved with the swagger of authority, his sleeves rolled up past his elbows. Epaulets with gold insignia flashed in the firelight as he went to stand directly behind the novice. Riga could see that he was whispering something. Then the rifle cracked, and the novice was sent staggering back, knocking into the officer behind him. There was silence. The wail of the monks halted as the body of the old monk slumped onto the courtyard's flagstones, his legs crumpling beneath him. The bewildered silence was suddenly pierced by further shots, but this time it was the other soldiers, firing their rifles into the air and cheering. The officer moved round in front of the novice and, taking the rifle from him, patted his shoulder reassuringly. The boy's knees sagged, and the officer reached forward to support him. For a moment they stood locked together, two figures set apart from the others. Then, with practiced movements, the officer swiveled the rifle in his hands and slammed the bolt-action shut once again. Without turning to look at the huddled group of old monks, he shouted, "Next!"